なあ、秋山さんってお笑い好き？
Uh, we haven't ever seen. I mean, Akiyama has a sense of humor, right?
Ah,
It's Osaka, right? Come on. It's a lot. Oh, okay.
やっぱり
We actually didn't know that about Akiyama. You knew it?
秋山さんって話もおもろいし、間の取り方も上手やん。せやからきっとお笑いが好きなんちゃうかなって思ってて。
That's fair too. Like, that's how we're doing it. We're basically you basically summarize what we were doing because Akiyama is pretty charismatic, and he's pretty good with snappy conversation. That typically is a great indicator for an appreciation for stand-up comedy. That doesn't necessarily mean you're good at stand-up comedy, just an appreciation for it. Because being very rapid on your feet and focusing on conversation, you learn to appreciate what stand-up comedians are doing on the fly. It's quite impressive. It's way harder than a skill that is not very well practiced. That's some unusual reasoning right there. Unusual. Akiyama, get out of here.
そう？お笑い好きな人って話上手で人の話聞くのも上手やない？
Yep.
話下手な人はオチもなくダラダラ喋るし、変なとこでちゃちゃ入れてくるしで最悪や思うわ。
I don't know about worse, like having an opinion about that, but that is the point. Yes. When here's a super deep cut. We're gonna go into this is gonna be a slight hot take. It's harder to explain without like 2 or 3 hours of converging conversation. But the biggest deep cut I could say about games, especially video games, and I actually this actually happened yesterday and it's still on my mind. So if you're wondering about, are there any, say you're suffering from, I don't know, if you feel like you're suffering from a lack of conversationalness or anxiety or social anxiety, like social induced anxiety, or the confidence in conversation, and you wanted, what's a wonderful, like, you're not a scholarly person and you're trying to think like, ah, man, I'm not gonna sit there and learn about conversationalism and read about pop culturalism and all that in order to develop intellectually how to approach conversationalism. You're more of an intuitive person. Well, one indirect way of improving intuitively on conversation is actually playing games that involve conversationalism. And one of the sources of conversational games are role-playing games. And even more so than role-playing games are more or less dating sims, or visual novel games, or novella games, or point-and-click adventure games. Those types of games involve very densely conversations. So if those are boring, unfortunately there's not much more gamified versions of conversations. But when you start reading a lot of conversations and you start hearing a lot of different angles to a conversation, a lot of times just being exposed to that produces an intuition. You do get a lot less for your money, as in a lot less with your investment of time if you're not intellectually invested at the same time. So like actively participating as opposed to playing it as a game. So whenever someone comes up and says, yeah, these games, like, I don't want to read dialogue, I don't want to, like, dialogue's boring, like I can't get into dialogue, or dating sim games are boring, or like that could never happen, this could never happen. So it's not about whether it's realistic or unrealistic. It's the act of practicing connecting the dots and writing in general. The other alternative is probably much, much worse for those people who write off games that are dialogue heavy, and that's to literally write. So you do creative writing, you give seminars, you teach. Those are way higher barrier than playing a game that has a narrative with choices that are restrictive so that you understand how those choices flow. A choose your own adventure game doesn't teach you how to converse with uncontrollable factors like the other person. So if you're playing a game that where you can like type in all the answers or always choose the answer you want, I would even go as far as saying those things make you a worse conversationalist than a better one. It not only reiterates your habits, it enriches for the only responses you can give. So it makes you even less charismatic. So when you're focused on video games, if you're ever wanting to maximize a skill set that you might learn intuitively, is to be really into or finding some sort of emotional or sentimental connection to a narrative that's presented outside your narrow-minded universe. So like whatever you're thinking about yourself, what you would do, the more you say what you would do and the game literally does what you want to do, you aren't practicing conversationalism. You're practicing how to be yourself. And that's great. It gives you confidence. It gives you self-esteem. It does not improve your charisma. Charisma involves understanding other people's perspectives, all the different connections. You might be very charismatic to people like yourself, but the more you practice just that, the narrower your ability to talk to people. So if that's involved, if your confidence and your anxiety is connected to your inability to have a predictable scenario from conversation, there's some indirect ways breaking the fourth wall of this that can help someone intuit it at least. But anyways, yeah, it happened yesterday, so and it checks out because that yesterday's interaction clearly revealed that that person that I know lacks any form of open-mindedness, and it's pretty much lives in a very restrictive world of dialogue. Anyways, like digression, but it was on my mind. So if you don't appreciate dialogue or writing or something, and then suddenly at the same time you have social anxieties and non-confidence in conversationalism, or maybe you encounter lots of bouts of disagreement all the time or frustration with talking to people, they're kind of related. Very, very strongly related. Fair enough. I guess good conversationalist structures their thoughts for timing and delivery, the way comedians do when they're telling jokes. I'm not great at telling jokes, so plenty of practice, room for improvement. She made a really apt point. So this character, seemingly out of the blue, made two very, like, the people watching thing and the conversationalism thing is pretty spot on, incredibly spot on. How about you? I bet you like stand-up, right? Do you go to see live performances? Interesting. Newscaster and into stand-up comedy. Oh, you're really into it. Why are you such a big fan?
なんでって
Fair question.
おもろいからに決まってるやん。
Yeah, my first thought was that's it. Alright.
なるほど。
I suppose that's straightforward enough. That was not really a reason. Not particularly. It's like relying on intuition and a reason tends to be an intellectual thing.
なんかね、笑ってると幸せな気せえへん？お笑い見てると幸せになんねん。芸人さんはほんますごい思うわ。
That's a funny statement. Doesn't laughing make you feel good? And I want to say most of the time laughing makes you feel good. But I actually don't think laughing always makes you feel good. But watching makes her happy, that's fair. It's still not a intellectual reason. Like, it's not explaining the emotions. But I think that's fair.
俺もだよ。
Talking to you always brings a smile to my face. You're a lot more flexible than I am, Akiyama.
ほんまに？嬉しいわ。
Comedians and hosts are both trying to make people smile. Indeed. Fair enough.
せやんな。芸人の人とかきっと水商売したらすぐに人気出ると思うわ。
I mean, sometimes they're one and the same. Because stand-up tends to be in the nightlife business. And when I mean by nightlife, probably maybe not the way she means nightlife, but they're technically a forms of evening entertainment.
そうか。
But in this context, they're talking about TV stuff, so maybe they're like talking about primetime TV stuff. So, or maybe like morning television programs or evening, like afternoon television programs. But generally, stand-up comedians, it's a nightlife thing. It's far more predominantly a nightlife thing than it is like broad daylight recording on a TV station or something. Outing a girl like that's not a bad idea. Oh, that's fair. But she's only average, as she claims. You know? Where's your practice? Okay. We know her hobby is people watching. So now let's get into this.
そういやさ。
何それ？どうい
Getting disillusioned with a man? Wow. That is... Wow.
どうだい？
Have you ever been disillusioned with a man? Akiyama with the deep questions.
ああ、あるある。あのね、うち口だけの男がとにかく嫌いやねん。
That's fair.
なんや、初めは調子のええこと言うとるんやけど、具体的なこと突っ込むと言葉濁したりして、ああ、こいつ絶対口だけやーって分かったりして。
It's hard for me to empathize with this phrase because it's like, it's an idiom that I don't agree with entirely. And what I mean by that is it's a product of its time. It's no longer like that anymore because the medium that illustrates most people is through an act of using language and conversation. So like what I mean is the walk the walk is like talk the talk now more than ever it's ever been. So this is like an old English, I'm gonna even say an older Americanized idiom that deals with time before this time. So like 2013, perhaps it's still long back, right? It's over 10 years ago. So perhaps that's still apt. But just to bring it up to speed, walking the walk involves talking really well. So I just went through a whole digression about improving conversationalism. Being a conversationalist is walking the walk. Being a person who just says whatever they want is talking the talk. So it still checks out. Like, he's talking about people who just talks whatever, talks themselves up, and then it's all talk. And an example would be someone that says, I'm a very nice person. Everyone loves me. I'm very good at X, Y, and Z, and that's it. Like that's talking the talk. It still checks out the same way. Like, they build themselves up and they can't back it up. Fair. But it's very different from someone who's very good at talking, because being able to talk and express and be considerate, charismatic and professional, that is walking the walk using talking as a skill. And that's on the internet now. That is the primary skill. And sure enough, it still checks out. Most people talk the talk. They cannot walk the walk. And whether they know it or not, that's kind of reflective of how successful they are online, because it's largely talking the talk. And you might be thinking, well, heck, what about those people doing flips on YouTube and stuff? They are communicating their skills by framing the skills on a medium. Communication is not, you can talk through demonstration. So it is one and the same still. It's a person who's capable of walking the walk that is through depiction of a message. So they can demonstrate it. So they have to understand how to communicate through the medium. So it's blurred. It's no longer like, hey, you exclusively talk. Somehow walking the walk is exclusive from talking. So personally, when someone says this idiom, you have to be very careful, because one would suggest it's someone who's not very in line with a very specific subset of people. And then when it's unfortunate, because the reason why I disagree with this type of phrasing is because it's encouraging people to think that not being able to talk well is optional. Like, not being responsible for what you say, not being responsible for thinking about what you want to say, or being considerate of what you want to say is optional, as long as you can back it up with your actions. So, like, for example, you can insult someone if you're being honest, and therefore you're a kind person. That doesn't check out. That's a dissonance. That's saying you're a terrible talker, so you can't walk in one respect, but hey, at least you're honest. But you're still a terrible talker. Just because you're honest doesn't make you a great talker. If you're honest, it also doesn't mean you're kind. Like, none of those check out. But because of phrasing like this, conversationalism on a medium that is dominated by talking is an incredibly negative experience. I would say it's one of the driving forces. Thoughts like this, devaluing the value or devaluing conversationalism, the need for proper writing and communication skills is largely one of the biggest contributors to the perspective of talking online. Like how it's incredibly negative to be earnest or reveal things or talk about deep things online, because the vast majority of people feel that talking skills is optional. Like you don't have to develop your ability to talk if you're true to yourself. If you walk the straight and narrow, it makes it all right to be incredibly F- conversationalist, and that mars the internet experience. I think that's one of the biggest 2020 post 2020 dissonance in online, where somehow emotionally and your actions make it so that even if you insult someone with your words and hurt them emotionally, it's okay, because you help kids get better at sports. That makes it all right for you to verbally abuse someone because you're being honest. That's kind of like the thing. It sounds exaggerated, but it happens I don't think I spent a single day going online. Like I could find 100 examples just by going on YouTube and scrolling down the comment section. It's filled with narcissism. People who have every right to be proud of what they do. Like, as a handyman of 34 years, here's the Skippy and here's what's facts and stuff. Say, all the power to you for working and having 34 years of experience of handyman. But your conversationalism sucks so much. It's so offensive, it's so forward, and you basically just start a forest fire in the comment section. So you're a hardworking handyman with a lot of experience. That's great. But because you're a hardworking handyman, you think that it excuses how terrible you are at writing and expressing your opinions online. I'll challenge anyone to go through an entire day watching a video, scrolling down the comment section, and tell me straight to my eyes, like straight up, tell me they didn't find a comment that illustrates what I just said. Like, in fact, probably the vast majority of the comments, I would say over 50% of the comments, in an illustration of people who can walk the walk, but definitely cannot talk the talk. It's so ironic, this phrase, because it's always talk the talk first, then walk the walk. It's to the point where they're no longer different. And it's pretty unfortunate, in my opinion. It makes pretty much content creators fear all the time, because if they say something, it can go bad. But if they do something, not so much. If you just video yourself doing cartwheels, it's less likely to raise eyebrows than explaining how hard it is to do cartwheels. Try it out yourself. I challenge the 1 or 2 people that will see this video, this section, in the near future. Try the social experiment. Demonstrate a skill and then teach a skill. The comments will be very different. And I can almost guarantee that the video that you just teach the skill by expressing is going to get a lot of negative stuff. Like stuff that will make you feel negative. Not like relative to my perspective, to your perspective. There will be more people who think they are experts at teaching something through verbal expression, through writing, than someone who sees the thing done and be like, yeah, you know what? I can't do that cartwheel. But when someone explains it without showing the cartwheel, they think they can do it. And then they will interject and overextend and reveal how inept their talking skills are. Because people are so conditioned to favor action as a literal action. And then what happens, you just have a bunch of communities who's so enriched to being discouraging, critical in a non-constructive way. You can be critical without being constructive, harmful, negative, a whole generation filled with social anxious people because they have no example of good social communication. They, you know, like when kids grow up on the internet, what do they see? They see negativity with poorly written comments, poorly written communication, misunderstanding, lots of people yelling at each other. It's no surprise that nowadays, when kids grow up, they fear talking to anyone. Because not only they don't have a great source of example of great conversationalism, they also only see a vast majority of negative conversationalism. Just people spewing their opinions like it's fact without being agreeable enough to have an opposing opinion or a differing opinion, as in just an alternative opinion, and always weighing their own opinion by miscommunicating it. Like, oh yeah, this stuff is garbage. Like, okay. This stuff's BS. Like, okay. Like, what do you say to that? Like, great. You are very disappointing. Go back to, in your little universe in your head and learn to express it better to someone else, right? That's a much bigger digression than I thought I was gonna go into. But hey, whoever sees this part, definitely feel free. I would love to take the bet. Definitely prove me wrong that you can go through this time of day and age without having an example of poor communication. It's no reflection on the credibility of those people. I believe everyone is earnestly, probably really sufficiently educated, have good intentions, work really hard. It does not substitute for not being able to talk. It just doesn't. I can be the kindest person in the world, but I can still suck at talking. It's just as important. And this part cuts deep, but it also makes me think of her as a Pepega. That's just how it works, in my opinion. It's so passé. It's so passé that it's hurting typical interactions, especially for the young ones. It's this is where you get into the whole thing like, oh yeah, you just got to develop thick skin, right? You just got to think like, well, if you're 30 plus or 40 plus and you spent a whole more than half your life in a situation where you have to deal with poor communication, then sure. But if you're like a teenager that's trying to grow up and think that the adults are very professional, understanding people, and all you get exposed to is that, and you never get exposed to an example of reasonable people, how do you form the thick skin in the first place? You don't. So the next time some like my age people say like, oh yeah, you know, you just got to be tolerant, you know, be thick skinned, learn how to take a joke. Like, yeah, but you didn't grow up in this generation. You grew up in the previous generation. The world is through talk. The like 70 to 80% of a kid's world growing up now is involved proper communication. And as adults who think just growing thick skin is the solution, you didn't offer any skills to deal with it in the first place. You intuited through experience. Intellectually, you have no way to process and express what it means to develop a thick skin. Like if you tell someone, oh, just grow a pair, what does that even mean? Because you suck at talking. You're good at walking. You're good at taking life and taking blows, but you suck at talking. You're the running problem. You try to teach someone how to deal with something, but you can't. Because you spend most of your time intuiting it. Pretty aggressive. But man, I say it because, in my opinion, I really feel terrible for younger people who are struggling with conversing and feeling alright. Like, conversing and talking with other people is a norm that she's taking for granted here in this game. She's depicting the social norm where talking to other people is a given before they prove what they say. And that's really like 2013. I agree. I still accept that this is about 2013. But in 2020 plus, not the case. In fact, a lot of times people prefer to just show but fail to explain anything. Like, you just don't explain things. Great example. Someone picks up their iPhone. It's like, how do you do this? Oh, you just push these couple buttons. It's like, but why? Like, how? Like, can you explain that to me? Why does this work? Have you done it? No, probably not. I mean, I don't even know how to explain certain things. And then when someone asks me, like a question, it's like, oh, why is it that way all of a sudden, right? I'm like, I have no idea. Maybe I should work on the talking portion. Okay, moving on though. So guys, we just front with the ladies then.
そうそう、そんなん見え張っても嘘がバレた時惨めになるだけやのに、なんで堂々とせえへんねやろ。
They lied. Maybe they just want to have a good time having drinks with someone at a cabaret club.
お客さんやったらええんやけどね。男として付き合うのは絶対あかんわ。